Hello, my name is Kevin Gray.
And I'm Sarah Wetherington.
We'll be reviewing the paper entitled Music and Speech Listening Enhance the Recovery of Early Sensory Processing After Stroke by Sarcamo et al. We created this video as a real-world assignment for Professor Steve Potter's neuroscience class at the Georgia Institute of Technology. To start, we'd like to give a little background information on the topics and ideas discussed in this paper. First off, brain plasticity refers to the ability of the human brain to change as a result of one's experiences. The brain encodes, stores, and monitors all incoming information. A particular concern for this video is the way in which the brain processes acoustic information. It can handle information from multiple sources that may even contain overlapping properties. Auditory sensory memory refers to the memory representation we immediately form of an auditory environment. This memory lasts for several seconds and serves as the first step for gating incoming auditory information of the memory system. It is vital for speech comprehension and working memory tasks. Measured mismatch negativity, which we'll refer to as MMN, is an index for auditory sensory memory function. MMN is an early response to violation in auditory regularity. For example, in this study, researchers presented harmonically rich tones above standard and deviant frequency for varying durations for stroke patients, which resulted in an MMN response. This response is elicited even when the subject is not paying attention to the stimuli, and it corresponds to behavioral sound discrimination accuracy. A previous study conducted by the same research group used neuropsychological testing and mood questionnaires to evaluate whether daily music and audiobook listening after middle cerebral artery stroke, MCA strokes, could improve cognitive recovery and mood. The results of the study showed that music listening improved verbal memory more than audiobooks and could possibly prevent depression. A stroke is caused when a section of the brain is not properly supplied with blood. There are several causes for this, but the end result is cell death due to lack of nutrients. A stroke of the MCA impacts a significant amount of brain tissue, primarily in areas responsible for auditory cognition. The MCA stems from the internal carotid artery. It supplies blood to a large portion of the brain, including the majority of the temporal lobe and part of the parietal and frontal lobes. The current study aimed to test whether music and audiobooks could influence auditory sensory memory and utilized a magnetoencephalograph, MEG. The MEG devices indexed the magnetic MMN response, and researchers were able to deduce a relationship between changes in MMNM and improved cognitive recovery induced by music. We will further explain their procedures shortly.
60 stroke patients admitted to the Department of Neurology of the Helsinki University Central Hospital for acute ischemic MCA stroke were included in this study. Patients had no prior neurological disease, no drug or alcohol abuse, no hearing deficit, were right-handed, were less than 75 years old, and were Finnish speaking. They were divided into 3 groups, including a music listening, audiobook listening, and control group. MEG measurements and psychological testing were conducted 1 week after the stroke occurred as a baseline value. Subsequent measurements and testing were completed 3 and 6 months later. In addition, researchers determined the location and size of the lesion via MRI evaluations on each patient. Music therapists collected information regarding pre-stroke leisure activities. Patients in the listening groups were provided with either a CD or audiobook cassette player and instructed to listen to music or books of their choice for a minimum of 1 hour per day. All subjects in these 2 groups kept listening diaries. Subjects in the control group were not given any listening material. For each MEG measurement, subjects laid in a bed with their head inside a helmet-shaped instrument and were presented with harmonically rich tones of varying duration and frequency. They were instructed to remain still, to ignore the sound stimuli, and to focus on watching a silent DVD without subtitles projecting to the ceiling. Researchers determined the MMNM response to changes in frequency and duration and controlled the data so that differences in brain activity could be attributed to memory-based processing. An extensive neuropsychological testing battery was used to evaluate cognitive recovery of the patients during the 6-month follow-up period. Verbal memory and focused attention were significantly improved. Verbal memory was assessed using story recall and word list learning tasks, and focused attention was assessed using the mental subtraction and Stroop subtests.
MMNM responses at the 1-week post-stroke stage confirmed that the music, audiobook, and control groups had comparable results in the MM-NM parameters before the intervention. During the recovery, changes in the frequency of MM-NM showed that both music and audio book listening groups had enhanced auditory sensory memory in the frequency domain relative to the control. Based on the changes in the MM-NM duration during recovery, audiobook listening during recovery selectively enhanced auditory sensory memory in the duration domain in right hemisphere damaged patients. Further, across all patients, the increment of the right hemisphere frequency MM-NM correlated significantly with improved performance in the delayed story recall and mental subtraction tasks. Results suggested that the enhancement of the frequency MM-NM response is related to the recovery of memory and attention, and that the relationship is mediated by music and audiobook listening.
Patients who listen to music and patients who listen to audiobooks showed greater enhancement of the frequency magnetic MMN amplitude in the right hemisphere as compared with control patients. Specifically, magnetic MMN correlated with behavioral improvement in the story recall and mental subtraction tasks, as these tasks placed heavier demand on speech comprehension and working memory, which are both closely associated with auditory sensory memory. Positive correlations were observed in both the music group and the audiobook groups, but not in the control group, suggesting that the link observed between changes in the magnetic MMN, memory, and attention were mediated by an enriched auditory environment. Thus, it is possible that enhanced auditory sensory memory may be one potential mechanism to account for the positive effect of music on cognitive recovery. Frequent exposure to complex auditory stimuli, such as music and speech, could enhance the molecular and structural plasticity that normally takes place in the recovering brain, serving as the neural basis for the effect of music and speech on auditory sensory memory. Listening to music and auditory books activates a widespread network of brain areas that are mainly supplied by the MCA, and these regions typically show increased plasticity and susceptibility to environmental influence in the early recovery stage. Moreover, enhanced glutamatergic neurotransmission could also account for the effects of music and speech on auditory sensory memory. Glutamate is a neurotransmitter that plays a critical role in learning and the initiation of long-term memory formation. Studies have shown that enriched sound environment can enhance glutamate expression and receptor function, so glutamate may serve as a crucial neural factor linking auditory stimulation, changes in magnetic MMN and memory, and stroke recovery. In conclusion, the results of this study demonstrate that frequent listening to music and audiobooks after neural damage can enhance auditory sensory memory, as indexed by changes in magnetic MMN amplitude. The results encourage the use of music in neurological rehabilitation as improved early treatments for stroke patients, and this study reinforces the underlying paradigm of brain plasticity and environmental influence on processing. We would like to thank you for your interest in our review of this compelling study.